Okay, let's talk about Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre signs a minimum deal for 1 year with Philadelphia 76ers. Look, for a team that is going through this really, interesting James Harden standoff right now, I don't think that there is a move that the 76ers could have made on the market, just in terms of insurance and depth, that made more sense than signing Kelly Oubre. On top of it, this is a team whose wing depth got a bit obliterated by free agency. Guys like Shake Milton, Jalen McDaniels departing, George Niang as well leaves to go to Cleveland. I think that just getting a wing who is 6'7" and can be a bit of a scoring difference maker for them is valuable at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's exactly what I texted you. I was like, I'm kind of in on this for them. Like it gets kind of marred by everything else going on, exactly like you said. But I'm excited about even just speaking defensively, having somebody like Joel is completely different from what Kelly has ever had behind him in terms of a rim protector. Now obviously, like, he's played with some good rim protectors, but Joel is on a different level when he's at his best. And I think when you think about what Nick Nurse could bring in terms of what they potentially do to be a little bit more interesting schematically this year, and having, we have, wild to say, 8 years of footage of Kelly Oubre in the NBA. We know what he brings. So I think Nick Nurse is the guy that I look at like, you could get some interesting stuff out of him. I think that there's a world where maybe he's able to rein in some of his things that he does off the ball, and they're able to get the most out of him just being big and present. And I think that you can envision that being a good pairing with Joel. I think the biggest thing that I liked, though, was exactly like you mentioned. This team has just never, in Joel's time, basically since they traded Robert Covington, they have never had a player at the 3-4 that I think you feel comfortable, all that comfortable with offensively, that they're just going to take shots. And even if they're not making them, they're going to take them. And I think having a guy who we know has absolutely no issue being aggressive, I see the vision with it. I think, again, the idea is this could go incredibly like it has the last couple of years, and you end up feeling kind of wishy-washy on it, and it ends up being fine. Or maybe there's room for it to even be a little bit better. And I think that's what I'm really interested to see happen.
This is going to be a really interesting push-pull, I think, between a team that desperately needs more shot creation, either off the bench or potentially in the starting lineup if the James Harden thing really goes south and they end up not getting much for him and having to move him. But if not, he could be an incredible bench scorer. I mean, you look at the last 4 years of Kelly Oubre's career, 1 with Phoenix, 1 with Golden State, and 2 with Charlotte. He's averaged 17 points a game, shot 44% from the field. He takes threes. He is somebody that I don't want to say teams feel like they have to close out hard on necessarily, but I do feel like he gets respect from opposing defenders, at least in terms of where he's going to try and get to his spots, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that he's willing to take them. He will take threes, sometimes off the pull-up, sometimes off the catch. A lot of the time, it's not an immediate, I'm going to catch and I'm going to fire. It's, I'm going to catch, I'm going to pause, and then maybe if I don't see a driving lane, I'll fire. But I mean, look, if you're getting a guy that averages 17 points and 5 rebounds, he is still only 27 years old. And that's a 4-year run of games where he's done that. Look, there are inherent limitations here. I get it. But for a minimum, you really can't do much better than that for a minimum, in my opinion, if you are a team that desperately needs shot creators. And I think that Philly really just needed more shot creation at the end of the day, in terms of really being able to have insurance for if this situation goes south.
Yeah. And I think, again, like we always do with everything, I love pulling in just context of what the last couple of years have been like. When Danuel House was the answer as the first wing off the bench, or even as a spot starter last year, Kelly Oubre is an upgrade, point blank period.
Yeah.
So I can't find any room to really be too critical of it. I just want to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, speaking about the Sixers a little bit more grand scale here, the Harden thing still remains omnipresent at this point with where their direction will be this season. They have Tobias Harris. They still have DeAnthony Melton. And then obviously Tyrese Maxey. I think the expectation is that he's going to have to take this really big leap forward. And I think he has a chance to do that for sure. Other than that, it really does get a little bit dire. Like you'd be relying on Daniel House. You'd be relying on Paul Reed. You'd be relying on, Jaden Springer, Patrick Beverly, Danny Green to create shots potentially. And you just can't really do that in the modern NBA. Like Patrick Beverly is aggressive and is willing to like make shit happen sometimes. But Kelly Oubre has actual game. And a lot of these guys as well, like Tobias Harris is an expiring deal. DeAnthony Melton is an expiring deal. Tyrese Maxey is a restricted free agent at the end of the year, but that is in theory an expiring deal. They could end up trying to make some, moves around Joel Embiid in order to try and keep him with a second star if James Harden ends up moving, and having this depth option of Oubre at least gives them some cover, I think. And look, if they do end up having to sell at the deadline because this thing just completely goes south, Kelly Oubre wasn't worth seemingly much at the deadline last year, but if he has a good year, you might be able to get, a pick or two for him in the second round. And when you've only paid him a minimum deal, I think you're a lot more amenable to moving him for a low, return when you've only invested, $3 million in him.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I would agree with that.
So I just kind of want to look at the just like on-off numbers briefly while we're talking here for Oubre, because this team with Charlotte last year struggled in the opening half of the season, which is a lot of when Kelly played. I don't really think they're all that valuable. Like he is a guy that had like a negative 8.2 net rating when he was on the court, and then when he was off the court, it went down to 4.75, which is not ideal, but I just think that says more about the fact that, Charlotte, it seemed like kind of struggled a little bit in certain moments early in the season that had a little bit to do with him, but I don't know that it had like a crazy amount to do with him. He had that like big stretch where he was out from, probably early January until mid-December or mid-February, I'm sorry. And then like missed probably the last 10 games or something like that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with Kelly. It's a good signing though. Like it makes sense to me. Do you have any takes on why he took so long to find a landing spot? Because that seemed to be like a real piece of this conversation.
That's a good question. I don't have a great opinion on that because I don't know anything about Kelly as a person. I haven't seen, like, frankly, I've never seen reporting about him being a bad locker room person. Like, I think that part of what's difficult too, I feel like the image of Kelly is like as a player isn't great based on some of the things we just talked about. Like, I think that there are real questions sometimes about what his actual impact is. To me, I've just always kind of been of the mindset of he's a replacement level player that can do good things, and in the right context, he can do some good things for you. And I think like it all just depends. Like Golden State, I think was the low of lows. If you're going to ask him to make quick decisions and be somebody who doesn't stop the ball, good luck, buddy, because that's not going to happen. But then like the Phoenix season, I think that's when you look and go, okay, this is a guy who will really empowering, do some stuff as a secondary shot creator, play in transition. That's the perfect version of Kelly Oubre that you're going to get. And I think it all just depends on how a team looks at it. And I think especially with a team that's, that does kind of need the depth to pop, I hope that they're looking for him with the right answers.
And look, he's going to create transition opportunities. He's going to use those long arms to try and shoot passing lanes, even though he's not a particularly good defender. He does, occasionally create those chances. So when you have Joel backing you as a rim protector, I do think that you have a little bit more leeway to be able to do that. Not to say it's a great thing always with Kelly, and I think the effort level, hopefully can continue to rise maybe as they play relevant basketball, if they're able to play relevant basketball this year, pending the James Harden thing. But they certainly will be at least like viable, given that they have Joel Embiid, last year's MVP. They're going to be a good team as long as he stays healthy. it's a good signing. It makes sense to me.